Shinobu was the first Hashira to be slain in the final confrontation against Muzan Kibutsuji's forces. Her sacrifice, though heroic, marked a devastating loss for the Corps. The crows carried this news to her fellow Hashira and the remaining demon slayers, each of them feeling the weight of her death. To defeat Doma, Shinobu made the ultimate decision to sacrifice herself in battle. Although she was undeniably weaker than Doma, she was faster and more agile, giving her an edge in the fight. Throughout the clash, Doma couldn't help but praise Shinobu for her incredible speed, but he also noted her lack of strength, preventing her from decapitating him the only way to truly end him. She lacked the power to deliver a fatal blow, but Shinobu resorted to stabbing him with her sun blade, which was laced with a deadly poison. Unfortunately, Doma anticipated her strategy. Thanks to his shared memories with Rui, one of the lower moons, he recognized her intentions and skillfully neutralized the poison Shinobu had injected inside him. As the battle dragged on, it became clear that Shinobu was running out of time. Eventually, Doma captured and began absorbing her, taunting her with the cruel promise that she would live inside him for eternity. Just as Kanao arrived, witnessing her master's grim fate, Doma remained unaware that Shinobu had one final trick up her sleeve. For those who had fought alongside her, Shinobu's death was a painful reminder of the stakes in this ultimate battle. But even in death, her courage and the poison she crafted would continue to play a crucial role in the fight against Doma and the other demons within the Infinity Castle. After Shinobu's tragic death, the weight of defeating Doma fell on Kano's shoulders. She fought with everything she had, but Doma's strength was overwhelming. Despite her best efforts, Kanao managed to land a few blows, though none were powerful enough to sever the demon's head. Just when things seemed bleak, Inosuke burst onto the scene. But instead of attacking immediately, Doma paused, scrutinizing Inosuke with a curious expression. As memories resurfaced, Doma suddenly remembered something significant. Inosuke's mother had once been his follower. He claimed that he hadn't intentionally killed her, but rather that circumstances had forced his hand. Kotoha was described to be a beautiful, young woman, similar in appearance to her son, though Doma stated that she had a softer appearance compared to Inosuke. She wore her long, black hair tied up in a bun and had emerald green eyes. Kotoha was a kind and loving woman, always showing appreciation to those around her. She treasured Inosuke dearly and would always sing lullabies to him when he was a baby, promising to always protect him no matter what. When meeting Doma, she found a fond liking in him due to him helping her escape the abuse she was facing from her family. According to Doma, she was naive and not very smart. Doma describes her as a beautiful but innocent person. It's unknown whether Doma exaggerated her low intelligence or if her kind nature coupled with the fact that she was partially blind from the beatings she endured from her husband made her ignorant to Doma's true nature. Quite contradictory, however, Doma also claimed that she was also sharp despite her supposed stupidity. And that's how she found out about him being a cannibalistic demon who devoured his followers. Kotoha gave birth to Inosuke at the age of 17 or 18 and was in an abusive relationship with Inosuke's father, as well as with her mother-in-law, who bullied her on a daily basis. One day, during one of his outbursts, she bit her husband's hand, grabbed Inosuke, then ran away from the abusive household, fleeing barefoot through the snow. Since she didn't have parents or any siblings to go to, she was running ahead until she reached the Paradise Faith cult, taking shelter as one of the worshippers of Doma. A leader of the cult, she lived there happily with her son until she suspected that the worshippers were being eaten by Doma, after accusing him of lying to his followers. She ran from the temple with Inosuke in her arms and tried to go through the forest, but was trapped by a cliff. In her final moments, she apologized to Inosuke for failing to protect him and tosses him into the river as an attempt to save his life. She was ultimately killed and eaten by Doma, who claimed to have devoured her to the bone. This revelation struck a deep chord in Inosuke. He had long believed he had no family, no mother to mourn. But now, faced with the truth, A fierce rage ignited within him. Fueled by a newfound sense of loss and a burning desire for revenge, Inosuke launched himself at Doma with a fury he had never felt before. His every move was driven by the intense emotion of fighting for someone he barely knew he had lost. But even with this surge of raw power, Doma was still too strong. It seemed that no matter how hard they fought, defeating Doma was a challenge far beyond their reach.
頼みましたよ.
In the aftermath of Shinobu Kacho's tragic fall, Doma, upper rank 2 of the Upper Moons, found himself face-to-face with Kanao and Inosuke. He unleashed his deadly ice clones, perfect replicas, each as lethal as the original, and seemed inevitable that Kanao and Inosuke were fighting a losing battle. Doma turned his back on the skirmish, assuming his clones would easily dispose of the two. But as he made his way towards the exit, a subtle but shocking change began to take hold. Without warning, his left cheek began to crumble, disintegrating before his eyes. Doma staggered, his once smug demeanor replaced by disbelief and horror. The poison coursing through his veins was irreversible, and the mighty demon was powerless to stop his own unraveling. Doma, arrogant, formidable, and feared by all, had met his end not at the hands of brute force, but through the meticulous and deadly strategy of Shinobu, the very Hashira he deemed the weakest. Her final act of defiance, a lethal poison that even the most powerful demon could not overcome, had sealed his fate.
どのようにお詫びいたしましょう。目玉を。
During the final, critical moments when Doma was vulnerable, Kanao knew she couldn't afford any mistakes. She unleashed her ultimate skill, the flower-breathing, final form, equinoctial vermilion eye. Her eyes, now bloodshot and glowing with intensity, granted her unparalleled precision and speed. She could see Doma's attacks before they even began, reading the slightest twitches of his muscles, the subtlest shifts in his joints, and the faintest flickers in his gaze. Every movement was laid bare before her, allowing her to counter and dodge with near-perfect accuracy. But this power came at a terrible cost. Using it pushed her eyes to their limits, threatening permanent blindness. Despite the risk, Kanao pressed on, knowing it was her only chance to take down the powerful demon. Even Doma, who had faced countless Hashira, couldn't help but admire her skill, remarking that her abilities might even surpass those of her mentor, Shinobu. In that moment, Kano's resolve and the price of her ultimate technique shone brighter than ever, proving that she was more than just a warrior. She was a force to be reckoned with. Over 100 years ago, a child named Doma was born with a strange and almost magical charm. His pale hair and rainbow-colored eyes made him stand out, and people believed he was special, like he could talk to the gods. His parents, who weren't very smart and were looking for something to believe in, made him the leader of a group they called Paradise Faith. Although Doma thought his parents were foolish, he went along with it, acting as their leader even though he never once heard the voice of any god. Sitting in a fancy room filled with beautiful decorations, Doma would spend his days meeting with many followers who came to him for help. They shared their sad stories and begged him to lead them to a place like paradise. But to Doma, these stories were boring, and he couldn't understand why people would look to a child like him for help. He found it silly that they were so desperate to escape their problems. Though he pretended to cry with them, his tears were fake. To Doma, the gods, paradise, and all the things they believed in were just made-up stories people told themselves to feel better. Doma didn't really understand feelings. When he was a boy, he watched his mother lose her mind and stab his father to death because he had cheated on her with other women. She then poisoned herself right in front of Doma, but instead of feeling sad or scared, Doma was just annoyed by the blood all over the room and grossed out by the awful smell. He was more worried about getting the room cleaned up than the terrible thing that had just happened. When Doma turned 20, he met Muzan Kibitsuji, the first and most powerful demon, who turned him into a demon too. Doma continued to lead the cult, but his mission took a dark turn. He convinced himself that his job was to lead his followers to paradise by eating them. In his twisted mind, he thought that by devouring them, he was ending their pain and giving them peace. To Doma, paradise wasn't some far-off place, but the quiet that came when he took their lives. So he kept going, believing that he was saving his followers from the pain of living. Doma's downfall was not just the result of a battle fought with blades and poison, but the culmination of a deeper struggle fueled by the emotions he never understood. Though Shinobu lost her life in the first half of the fight, her sacrifice became the poison that slowly drained Doma's strength, setting the stage for Kanao and Inosuke to deliver the final blow. In the end, it wasn't just skill or strategy that defeated him, it was the collective power of the emotions he had mocked and discarded. The fierce determination of those he had wronged, their pain, and their unwavering desire for justice became his true undoing. Doma, who never grasped the meaning of human emotion, was ultimately brought down by the very thing he believed made others weak: the love, anger, and grief of those whose lives he had shattered.